Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I moved to a quiet Arizona valley to escape the chaos of city life, I never imagined the true danger would come wearing safety vests and fake authority. What started with a strange letter turned into a battle for my home, my privacy, and something much darker. I moved to Arizona to escape chaos, not to borrow a new kind of it. 3 days after my daughter and I settled into our home in hidden Mesa Valley, I was finally getting used to the quiet. The mountains wrapped around our little property like a natural fortress. The morning air smelled like pine and dust, and the silence was exactly what I needed after spending a decade in Chicago traffic. I worked remotely now, and all I wanted was a place where my daughter Emma could grow up without hearing sirens every night. Early that morning, while Emma was brushing her hair for school, I heard the hum of a mail truck stopping outside. I didn't think much of it at first until I saw an envelope on my porch railing when I walked out with her backpack. It was crisp, official-looking, heavier than the typical junk mail. The envelope had a gold seal sticker on the corner with the letters HOA wrapped around a drawing of a mountain ridge. I didn't belong to a homeowners association, so my first reaction was confusion, followed by an immediate annoyance, like getting a phone call from a telemarketer who somehow knows your name. I opened it. The letter was short, written in a tone that felt like a kindergarten teacher scolding a misbehaving toddler. It read, "Dear Mr. Brady, as per Section 9.3.5 of the Hidden Mesa Heights Safety Regulation, please provide a duplicate set of keys to your residence and gate, as well as the code to your security system in a sealed envelope to the HOA office within 5 days. This is required to maintain a safe and orderly community response in emergency evacuations." It was signed by someone named Karen Lancaster, safety coordinator and president. Emma was zipping her jacket and caught me staring at the letter like it had personally insulted my IQ. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Someone thinks they need keys to our house," I muttered. "Do we know them?" she asked. "Nope," I said. "And they definitely don't know us. When I bought the house, the developer made a point of telling me I was not under any HOA. I even paid a little more to make sure of it. The house sat outside the boundary line, intentionally, according to the original documents. I pulled the contract from the kitchen drawer, scanned it again, and just like I remembered, it stated that the property was one of several lots that were excluded from HOA jurisdiction due to independent ownership and legacy land usage rights. Fancy language meaning HOA can go chew on cactus. I sat at my desk and wrote a polite but firm response. "My property is not part of the HOA. I will not be providing keys. Please confirm removal of my address from your mailing list." I emailed it to the contact address listed below the signature. I figured that would be the end of it, like swatting away a fly from a sandwich. By lunchtime, I received an email back. It didn't thank me for the clarification. It didn't apologize for the mistake. It didn't even pretend to sound human. It read, "Your property is included in the newest Jurisdiction Boundary Update, 2021 revision. Compliance with HOA regulations is mandatory. Failure to provide requested access is a violation of community order." No explanation, no legal reasoning, no proof. Just a threat dressed like a memo. I stared at the message, then at the copy of my contract sitting on my desk. It wasn't just written proof. This thing had notarized stamps, developer signatures, maps, the whole bureaucratic feast. I took pictures of every relevant page and printed out 3 fresh copies. Old habits die hard. Engineers like backup plans. I sent a second response attaching the documents and requested that they review recorded county maps. I added a sentence that was far less polite. "Your jurisdiction does not extend to my property. Further attempts to collect personal security information will be treated as harassment." Emma tugged on my sleeve, asking if we were late to school. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and tossed the letter into the passenger seat. While driving, I caught myself laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was something so stupid it almost looped back around to genius. Some HOA president thought she owned extra land simply because she printed a map and taped some rules to it. Chicago had gangs with more self-awareness. Whatever game they were trying to play, I wasn't joining. And if someone thought they could get keys to my home, they were about to find out the only thing I give away for free is sarcasm. The next morning started off as quietly as expected. I made coffee, packed Emma's lunch, and reminded her, again, not to forget her homework folder this time. She insisted she wouldn't, so naturally I checked her backpack anyway before we left. Parenting makes you a professional skeptic. We drove down the long gravel road leading onto the main street. From that angle, our house looked like one of those postcard cabins people hang on their office walls when they're too scared to quit their job. With the sun rising behind it, it almost made me forget about yesterday's HOA circus. Almost. We were halfway to school when I glanced at my phone screen mounted on the dashboard. My home security app sent a motion alert from the front gate. Normally it was a deer or a delivery truck turning around on the wrong property, but this time the camera thumbnail showed two people wearing reflective vests marked Hidden Mesa Security Committee. They were on my property, and they were not deer. I tapped the live view. The video opened, and there they were. Two strangers climbing over my gate like they were sneaking into a music festival. One of them landed in a cactus patch, which would have been hilarious if they weren't trespassing. They dusted themselves off and started walking around my yard with a tablet, filming the exterior of my house. They checked windows, scanned the porch, and then the shorter one approached my front door. He kneeled down, pulled out something from his pocket, and began poking at the lock with it. It wasn't a key. It definitely wasn't a screwdriver. It looked like one of those universal bypass tools locksmiths use in emergencies, the kind that shouldn't be casually used by strangers wearing neon vests they bought from the internet. I pulled into the school parking lot faster than the speed limit would recommend. Emma looked at me, confused, and I put on whatever face a parent is supposed to wear when they don't want their kid to panic. "Something's up with the house. You'll take the bus home today, okay?" I told her. She nodded like she was used to this kind of thing. I dropped her off and immediately drove back, calling the sheriff's office on the way. When I pulled into my driveway, the two inspectors were still there. They jumped when they saw me, like raccoons caught inside someone's pantry. I stepped out of the car before they could open their mouths, and I didn't bother being friendly. "Step away from my door," I said, "right now." The taller one stuttered, "Sir, we were conducting a mandatory safety inspection." By trying to pick my lock, I cut him off. He raised both hands like he expected me to pull a weapon out of thin air. The door appeared unsecured. We were checking for potential risks. I looked at the front door. The deadbolt was clearly locked. I looked back at him. Didn't look unsecured to me. Before they could launch into another lie, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Two deputies stepped out and walked toward us. I showed them the video on my phone and explained that these people had illegally entered my property, attempted to tamper with my lock, and refused to leave. The deputies questioned them separately. Their story was as pathetic as it was predictable. According to them, they believed the homeowner might have left in a hurry, and the house could have been at risk. They claimed their committee was authorized to perform visual safety checks. Apparently, safety now included burglary drills. One deputy pulled me aside and said the magic words law enforcement loves to use. Since they didn't break the lock, it might be hard to charge them right now. I asked him if sneaking over a locked gate and trying to bypass a door counted as a polite visit. He didn't disagree. He just looked tired. They let the two idiots go with a warning after documenting the situation. They took statements, wrote an incident report, and advised me to file a digital complaint with the county attorney if I believed the HOA was exceeding its authority. That was the legal equivalent of a pat on the head, and good luck out there. The moment they pulled away, I forwarded the footage to the county attorney's office with a formal statement. Attempted illegal entry by private individuals under false administrative authority. I copied their full names from their vests, Rosen and Collins, and sent everything with timestamps. Then I put up a brand new sign on my gate. No HOA access. Trespassing will be prosecuted. I wasn't bluffing, and if they wanted a war over keys, they were about to find out I locked doors for a living. 2 days passed without a single email, call, or unwanted visit, and I'd almost convinced myself that the HOA had retreated to lick its ego. Then a thick envelope arrived in the afternoon mail. No gold sticker this time, just a plain envelope with a window displaying my name, as if it were a utility bill. Inside was an invoice printed in bold, angry letters demanding $1,250. The reason, non-compliance with Section 9.3.5, failure to provide emergency access key. There was also a line item for administrative enforcement fee. I didn't know what that meant, but I guessed it was HOA language for because we feel like it. Underneath the charges was a map. It didn't look like county paperwork. It looked like a glorified screenshot of a zoning website decorated by someone who just discovered Microsoft Paint. The lines indicating HOA boundaries were highlighted in neon orange, and my house was suddenly inside them. My house. The one clearly outside the border in every legal document I owned. I scanned it carefully. The driveway on the map was drawn wrong. The creek behind my property was missing altogether. It wasn't a county document. It was a Frankenstein of a map stitched together with enthusiasm and fraud. I called my real estate attorney, a calm, older guy named Armand who specialized in property disputes. He asked me to email him the map. I did. And 2 minutes later, he called back with a deep sigh. Mr. Brady, this is not a legal boundary revision. This is an amateur composite. The footer is missing a registration code. There's no surveyor stamp. And the map data has been pulled from a partial county layer that is 5 years out of date. Translation: a child with a laptop could have forged this. Armand continued. They likely hired a private mapping contractor. Sometimes HOAs do that to correct errors without going through official channels. But none of that holds legal weight. He paused, then added, I advise you to gather everything they send you. Also, don't pay a cent. I hung up, feeling confident, until an unexpected knock sounded on my door. When I opened it, I found a man I'd never seen before, thin, sunburned, looking as if life had chewed him up and spit him back into society with apologies. His name was Dan Rice. He lived at the other end of the valley, about 7 minutes from my place. He looked nervous, like he was about to confess to a murder, or worse, borrowing someone else's lawnmower. He said he got the same letter requiring keys a week earlier. Unlike me, he didn't question it. He thought it was just how they do things here. He handed over his gate key, house key, and even the passcode to the garage keypad because the HOA representative seemed official. I could tell he regretted every second of that conversation. 3 days later, he came home from work to find his garage door slightly open, his toolbox missing, and his security system offline. When he tried logging in, it showed that his home monitoring account had been migrated for community safety purposes. It took him 2 hours on the phone to get his access back. The system showed log entries at times when he wasn't home. Dan said he suspected someone entered his house. He couldn't prove it, but there was an empty beer can in the kitchen trash that he didn't drink. Someone rummaged through his place, relaxed enough to take a drink. While he spoke, he kept rubbing his hands like a man trying to wash guilt off his skin. I thought it was real. I thought I had to do it, he muttered. They said if I didn't, the insurance wouldn't cover anything in a wildfire. There it was. Fear as leverage. Fear makes people surrender more than force ever could. I sat him down at the kitchen table, made coffee, and handed him a napkin because he was sweating like a priest in a casino. I told him what happened to me, showed him the footage of the lock-picking circus, and laid the fake map in front of him. He stared at it and said, "That creek isn't even on there. They didn't even bother to draw the creek." That made him angry. Good. Anger is useful. I told him I had already filed a complaint with the county attorney's office. His eyes widened when he realized he wasn't alone. I suggested he file his own statement and include the information about his missing property and compromised security system. I offered to send him the legal contact. He asked if I was doing it to help him. "No," I said. "I'm doing it because predators don't stop unless someone kicks back hard." Dan nodded. He left my house with a copy of my property documents, the lawyer's information, and a newfound sense of self-preservation. On the way out, he promised he would file everything. His voice shook, but there was steel under it. After he drove away, I scanned the map one more time, noticing a tiny watermark in the corner, faded but visible. A private mapping company. That was all I needed. If the HOA wanted to redraw the world, they were about to get a reality check that doesn't come with crayons. I didn't have to wait long for the HOA to notice that I wasn't rolling over like a lazy dog. The next morning, Emma and I walked outside to find glossy orange notices taped across my gate like warning labels on radioactive waste. The papers accused me of obstructing community emergency protocols, failing to provide life-saving access, and my personal favorite, jeopardizing neighborhood youth safety. Apparently, withholding my house key meant I didn't care if children burned alive in a wildfire. Nothing says community spirit like guilt-tripping arson fantasies. Emma looked at the notes, then at me. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I answered, pulling the notices down one by one, "but someone's wasting a lot of paper." We drove to school, but something felt off. I had the sense that the quiet valley wasn't so quiet anymore, not with the HOA circling like hungry coyotes looking for fresh meat. When I came home, there were 3 more flyers stuck to my mailbox. They read, "Keys keep children safe." One even had a drawing of a burning house next to a smiling family waving from a helicopter. Subtlety clearly wasn't part of the HOA skill set. By noon, I received an email invitation, no, a summons, to a mandatory HOA meeting regarding community safety compliance. It was scheduled for that evening. The email ended with, "Attendance is required for all homeowners." Considering I wasn't one, I replied simply, "I do not belong to the HOA." Within 5 minutes, I received a second message stating, "Attendance is still required due to emergency matters." I had to give them credit. They were persistent, like a rash. At 5 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. Standing there was none other than the Queen Bee herself, Karen Lancaster. Her hair was styled into a stiff blonde helmet, and her posture screamed, "I don't bend or apologize." She smiled the way crocodiles smile before they roll you into the mud. "Mr. Brady," she began, "we need to talk about your non-compliance." "Do we?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, making it clear she wasn't welcome inside. She clasped her hands like she was about to bless me with salvation. "Our community relies on fast evacuation procedures. You are single-handedly endangering the entire neighborhood by refusing to provide access keys. Imagine if you were away, your child was inside, and first responders couldn't enter quickly. We are trying to protect your daughter." There it was, using my kid as a bargaining chip. A classic move by people who love authority but hate boundaries. "You're not first responders," I replied. "You're a homeowners association with home invasion habits." Her smile stiffened like it had been glued in place. "We have a system," she insisted. "All doors must be accessible to the Committee of Safe Evacuation." "You mean a group of unlicensed volunteers with lockpicks?" I said. She didn't deny it. Instead, she raised her voice, pitching it loud enough to echo through the valley. "Refusing access is a threat to community welfare. If you continue this, you may be legally responsible for damage caused during emergencies." "All right," I said. "Then bring the law. Not flyers, not freeloaders and safety vests, and definitely not threats about my daughter." Her jaw tightened. She stepped closer, dropping the sweet grandma act. "You don't understand how things work here, Mr. Brady. This community listens to me. They trust me. If they find out you're against their safety, they won't take it well." That was the moment I realized something. She wasn't just power hungry. She needed control the way addicts need a fix. And she'd built her identity out of it, which made her dangerous. I didn't answer. I simply walked back inside and shut the door. Within 20 minutes, my phone buzzed with a notification. A neighbor had posted in a local community Facebook group. "New resident refuses to comply with evacuation protocols, putting everyone at risk. Please speak out before someone gets hurt." My house was officially being slandered online. Comments rolled in like mosquitoes after rain. Some defended me. Others demanded my compliance. And then there was one that stood out. "He's not even part of our HOA. They're forcing him. Someone needs to look into this." 20 minutes later, I received a private message from someone whose name I didn't recognize. It simply said, "I used to work with the mapping contractor. They altered the boundaries. I have proof." Proof. That one word made the rest of the threats feel like noise. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, they were about to learn what happens when the dirt fights back. The message from the unknown contact didn't let me sleep much that night. They sent me an email with attachments, screenshots of boundary files, timestamps showing manual edits, invoices from a private mapping subcontractor, and a note that said they paid extra to fix the problem lots. Yours was first on the list. I forwarded everything to the county attorney's office, along with a summary of Dan's break-in incident, the bogus fine, and the lock-picking circus from my security footage. I didn't need a law degree to know this was a pile of illegal fertilizer waiting to explode. 2 days later, a detective named Avery called. She spoke calmly, like someone who regularly deals with idiots and doesn't want to spoil the surprise. She asked me to confirm the series of events, the letters, the map, the recorded attempt to enter my house, and the neighbor's stolen property. When I finished, she said, "We're issuing a warrant to search the HOA office. Do not notify anyone. We don't want documents disappearing." Her tone implied she'd seen cover-ups before. The morning of the raid, it was almost disappointingly peaceful. The birds were singing, the sun was warm, and Karen was probably sipping coffee somewhere, convinced she ran the valley. Then 3 vehicles rolled into the HOA office parking lot. The sheriff's truck, a black unmarked SUV, and a car with county logos. Officers stepped out, wearing vests that actually said law enforcement, not the dollar store cosplay versions HOA volunteers wore. I was at a distance, sitting in my car near the cafe across the street, watching through the windshield like it was a live season finale. One officer knocked on the door, announced the warrant, and within seconds they were inside. It took them less than 10 minutes to start hauling out boxes. The valley had never been so quiet. Even the wind seemed curious. They brought out stacks of binders, computer hard drives, file boxes, and, my personal favorite, one metal lockbox that rattled with the distinctive sound of keys. A lot of keys. A sick kind of collector's item. The officers cataloged everything. One detective shook his head and muttered something along the lines of, "You've got to be kidding me." I didn't hear the exact words, but I didn't need subtitles. I knew the feeling. Detective Avery stepped outside, holding a folder marked "Confidential." She glanced at the box of keys and said, loudly enough for the bystanders to hear, 63 properties logged, 63 keys, 63 victims. And who knows how many unauthorized entries. The highlight came when they found a flash drive. They plugged it into a laptop, and the screen reflected in the office window. I couldn't see all of it, but I knew enough. Security camera footage, but not HOA office cameras, private home interiors. One clip showed a kitchen, another showed a hallway, a living room, all from inside people's houses. Someone was watching homes like a subscription service. And the data was organized with names, addresses, and timestamps. Someone painstakingly curated this surveillance like a hobby. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A video popped up featuring Dan's garage. And in that video was a guy I'd never met, rummaging through tools. He tossed things into a bag, closed a drawer, grabbed a drill, and chugged a beer before leaving. The audio picked up a woman's voice saying, "Don't forget to check the cabinets. The more you take now, the less they'll replace later." The voice was unmistakably Karen's. I didn't know whether to laugh or be disgusted. The queen of safety was running a side hustle as a glorified burglar recruiter. Not long after that, Karen herself stormed into the office parking lot as if she'd been summoned by telepathy. Her car screeched. She jumped out and marched toward the officers like she expected them to apologize for interrupting her kingdom. She tried to push past one of them, yelling that they were compromising critical emergency equipment. They arrested her on the spot, handcuffed, hair out of place, mouth still running like a faucet of ego and panic. She shouted something about saving lives, legal authority, and community protection protocols. The officers didn't even blink. They read her the charges: falsifying documentation, unlawful entry, unauthorized surveillance, and theft conspiracy. Her expression morphed from fake composure to shock to indignation so fast it deserved its own weather report. And then, like the world decided to throw in a joke, her adult son arrived. Yes, the realtor. He walked straight into the mess just in time to be shown the footage from Dan's garage. The moment he saw himself on the screen, beer in hand, he looked like someone who just found out their favorite sandwich was made of evidence. He was arrested right there. The crowd in the valley didn't cheer. Arizonans don't cheer for cops like a parade, but they stared in a way that meant reputations were being shredded in real time. The box of stolen keys was loaded into the sheriff's vehicle, the surveillance drives into another, and Karen into a third. I watched the parade leave, one car at a time, like a broken monarchy being escorted out. When the scene emptied out, I finally took a deep breath. Not relief. More like anticipation. This wasn't over. This wasn't justice. Not yet. The show was just entering its court episode, and I had front row seats. The raid broke whatever spell Karen had over Hidden Mesa. The valley had always felt like a private club, run by a stubborn queen. But now, the club members were realizing the queen kept their house keys in her pocket. People who once nodded politely to each other at community barbecues now looked over their shoulders, wondering who'd been inside their bedroom or who had seen their baby monitors without permission. Trust evaporated like desert rain. 2 days after the arrest, the county released an official statement confirming the investigation. It didn't list every detail, but it mentioned enough: illegal surveillance, unauthorized entry, unlawful possession of house keys, falsified jurisdiction maps. Social media exploded. Some residents expressed outrage. Others swore they always had suspicions. And a few insisted Karen was being framed for trying to help. Those loyalists were the same people who post conspiracy theories about recycling bins being government trackers. Meanwhile, real consequences began piling up. The HOA board held an emergency meeting without Karen, probably the first productive one in 10 years. They stood behind folding tables in the community center gym, looking like children caught throwing rocks at a cop car. The crowd wasn't angry in a loud way. It was quiet anger, tight shoulders, folded arms, eyes sharp enough to slice vegetables. People demanded answers. Who authorized Karen's committee? Who approved the new boundaries? Why did the HOA spend money on a private mapping firm? Why did they have keys? Why were their houses being filmed? The board tried to distance themselves from Karen. They said the access plan was misinterpreted, the surveillance drive was unknown to them, and the boundary adjustment must have been an oversight. They spoke in vague statements like politicians who don't want to admit they ate someone else's sandwich from the office fridge. The crowd wasn't buying it. And that's when it happened. 7 homeowners stepped forward to file a civil lawsuit, and I was one of them. Dan joined too, visibly shaking, but determined, with his lawyer at his side. More people were ready to sign on as witnesses, but lawsuits cost money, and the 7 of us were enough to set the legal wildfire. We met with our attorneys in a rented office space downtown. A long table, cheap fabric chairs, coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, and a stack of evidence boxes taller than a preschooler. Armaine, my attorney, slid a document packet in front of me. We're filing for damages, unlawful entry, privacy invasion, property interference, fraudulent jurisdiction claims, and emotional distress for your daughter. I didn't love the phrase emotional distress for your daughter, but I didn't argue. Emma had been tiptoeing around lately like she didn't know if she was allowed to exist without upsetting someone. The suit accused the entire HOA board, not just Karen. They tried to argue that Karen acted alone. Our evidence said otherwise. A meeting transcript had surfaced, one they never meant for anyone outside the board to see. In it, a motion was passed to create a committee of safe evacuation, and the line beneath it read, "All homes must permit access to facilitate emergency readiness practices." The motion was approved unanimously. Their signatures were right there, neatly printed. They were all in on it. They just didn't expect to get caught. While preparing for court, we learned even more. The mapping contractor testified that they were hired specifically to correct exclusion errors and integrate non-conforming properties into HOA management. The board never asked if it was legal. Their only concern was whether the contractor could make the map look official. As long as it looked like a boundary map, they didn't care if it was legal. The more we discovered, the worse the residents looked in the eyes of the law, not as victims, but as accomplices to a system they never questioned. That illusion was dead now, and they were scrambling to resurrect their dignity. Within a week of filing the lawsuit, public opinion went from cautious curiosity to outrage. But surprisingly, the outrage wasn't directed at the victims or even Karen. It was aimed at the HOA itself. People realized they had signed away their privacy, given power to people with no background checks, and trusted an organization that ran like a cult with rules written in invisible ink. The HOA board hired lawyers, expensive ones. They tried filing motions to dismiss the lawsuit. They argued that we weren't actual HOA members and therefore couldn't sue them. Our attorneys laughed so hard one of them spit coffee on the table. If we weren't members, then nothing they did to us was authorized, and every action they took was criminal trespass and harassment. The board had trapped themselves in their own argument like a toddler in a revolving door. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. Residents started calling our legal team, asking if they could join. Some apologized to Dan for doubting him. Some apologized to me, saying they didn't realize the HOA wasn't actually the law. But a few simply avoided eye contact in grocery stores like I was contagious, like standing up for myself might rub off on them. As for me, I wasn't angry anymore. That phase passed. Now I was focused, and if Karen liked playing queen, then I was going to be the guy who handed her eviction notice from the throne. The case was scheduled. The media got interested. Reporters started sniffing around, and Hidden Mesa was no longer a peaceful valley. It was the scene of a public reckoning, and the reckoning had subpoenas. Courtrooms smell like recycled air and nervous sweat. Ours was no different. The morning of the hearing, the gallery was packed with enough residents to fill a football bleacher. People leaned forward, craning for a view like they were about to watch a playoff game. Some looked eager, some ashamed, and some just looked like they were expecting free entertainment. Karen entered in handcuffs, flanked by deputies. She had traded her flawless hair helmet for something that looked like a frightened raccoon was sleeping on her head. Gone was her posture of authority. There was no crown left to wear. Her son arrived next, escorted like a discount sidekick in a real estate crime documentary. The HOA board sat behind their attorneys, trying to look calm, but the tremors in their folded hands gave them away. They looked less like a governing body and more like retirees auditioning for a toothpaste commercial gone wrong. Our attorney Armand didn't waste time or theatrics. He began with cold facts and big screens. First, the security footage of HOA volunteers climbing my gate, then the attempted lockpicking, then a parade of screenshots, forged maps, altered file timestamps, invoices to the mapping contractor, boundary edits marked non-conforming lots. Finally, the pièce de résistance, video of Karen's son in Dan's garage committing theft like it was part of a routine inspection. When Karen's voice played in the audio, not a soul in the courtroom moved. Hearing her say, "The more you take now, the less they'll replace later," was more damning than any sworn testimony. Then came witness statements. Dan told his story, shaking but resolute. A mother explained how her family found out their home security camera had been accessed remotely. An older veteran testified that his spare house key went missing after he complied with protocol, only for him to later find signs that drawers in his bedroom had been rifled through. Every story poured gasoline on a burning pile of shredded trust. The defense tried to paddle upstream with excuses. Karen's attorney claimed everything was part of a good faith public safety effort. The board's lawyers said they did not fully understand Karen's implementation decisions. The son's lawyer argued he was misguided by authority figures. And as for the surveillance footage, the defense had the audacity to call it a training archive. The judge rested their face in their palm for a full 10 seconds after hearing that. I don't think anyone has ever aged a decade from one sentence, but that judge might have. When it was Armand's turn again, he finished with one sentence. If safety was the intention, why were there stolen tools, open beer cans, and homeowners with no knowledge of what was taken from their houses? Silence swallowed the room. The judge's decision was exhaustive and devastating. The HOA was found liable for fraudulent land jurisdiction, unlawful collection of personal data, unauthorized entry, criminal property access, and privacy violations. They would pay compensation and all legal fees. They would be placed under external court-appointed management. Every homeowner's security system compromised by the HOA would be replaced at the association's expense. As for Karen, she was convicted of falsifying documents, property conspiracy, illegal surveillance, orchestrating unlawful entry, and endangering private citizens under false administrative authority. The judge sentenced her to 10 years with the possibility of parole only after serving 6, plus fines that made the courtroom collectively inhale. Her son received 6 years for burglary and aiding unlawful surveillance. 2 HOA volunteers were charged for breaking and entering, though their sentences would be significantly lighter. Karen screamed that she was protecting the community, that she was saving lives. No one flinched. The deputies pulled her away as she shouted at the board to fix everything and called the judge a municipal coward. The more she yelled, the more her former worshippers stared at their feet, realizing their queen wasn't fearless. She was just drunk on power and finally sober. The HOA board left without a word, escorted like they were radioactive. They had signed their authority away with their silence, and now that silence was the loudest admission. When they passed me, some nodded. Whether in apology or defeat, I couldn't tell. Either way, I didn't need their validation. Outside the courthouse, the desert sky stretched wide and empty. Reporters tried to swarm. Homeowners talked in clusters, some relieved, some embarrassed. A few thanked me. One older neighbor, who looked like he owned more gardening tools than teeth, gripped my hand and said, "I never thought anyone would stand up to them." Guess I was wrong. It wasn't praise. It was resignation, the kind that only comes when a kingdom falls. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. But the story of this place wasn't over. It would take months, maybe years, to unwind what Karen had built. Power like hers doesn't vanish. It leaves damage like a storm leaves broken fences and scattered shingles. And now, the community needed to rebuild. Not with trust, not yet, but with accountability. That was a start. The weeks after the trial felt strange, like walking through a neighborhood that didn't recognize itself anymore. Hidden Mesa didn't go quiet. Instead, it went honest. People weren't pretending everything was fine, the way they did when Karen ran the show. They weren't whispering behind closed doors. They just looked at each other differently, as if realizing they'd all been living with a smoke alarm that wasn't detecting fire. It was recording conversations. The HOA didn't go away. It couldn't. It was part of the valley's incorporation, like bad landscaping or scorpions you don't ask for. But it was stripped down, rearranged, and put under the control of a court-appointed property management firm. The former board members who once walked around with the importance of mall cops at a presidential inauguration now attended their own community meetings with their heads lowered. They avoided eye contact, spoke when spoken to, and didn't even attempt to use words like jurisdiction. The word had become a curse, a reminder of the kingdom they tried to build on sand. Every homeowner who had been surveilled or robbed received compensation. Security systems were replaced with top-grade models, paid for by the very fees Karen collected over the years. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She wanted access to every house, and now the valley was paying to make sure she would never access a broom closet again. Dan got his tools back, though he didn't trust a single one. He replaced them anyway, using the settlement money. When I ran into him at the hardware store, he looked lighter, not happy, just unburdened, like a man who could finally leave his doors unlocked again if he ever chose to. He still wouldn't, of course. Once someone steals your trust, the locks might change, but the habit doesn't. As for Emma, the school sent a formal apology for how she'd been treated, the result of a misunderstanding induced by jurisdictional misinformation. It was the kind of apology that sounded like it had been dragged across a legal minefield before being printed out and handed to me. She didn't ask about the HOA anymore. She just asked if people could still come into our house without permission. I told her no. And that was the only answer she needed. One of the reporters who covered the trial sent me a framed front-page clipping from the county paper. The headline read, "Hidden Mesa HOA Exposed in Security Scandal." Beneath it was a photo of the evidence boxes, the sheriff car with the box of stolen keys, and a blurry outline of Karen being led away. I didn't hang it. Framing your fight feels too much like keeping a trophy. But I kept it anyway, not as a reminder of victory, but as a warning. Power doesn't just appear overnight, and it doesn't disappear after a sentencing. It waits. It lingers. It looks for cracks to grow in. Before all of this, my property was just a house in a valley. Afterward, I decided it needed a border, not just a gate, a declaration. I hired a metalworker recommended by the sheriff's office. Together, we designed something that didn't look like a threat or a prison gate, but a statement. Black steel, clean lines, durable enough to withstand curiosity. When it was installed, the metalworker asked if I wanted a camera mounted to it. I shook my head. No cameras, just the gate. Let people wonder what's behind it. Curiosity is safer than power. On the front of the gate, in simple engraved lettering, it reads, "No HOA access. No exceptions. Not angry. Not arrogant. Just final." Cars pass by sometimes, slowing down as drivers read the words. Some nod. Some glare like they're offended by the existence of a boundary. I forget about it most days, until someone new in town asks who it belongs to. The neighbors answer for me now. They don't say my name. They say, "That's the house they can't touch." I don't feel proud of it. I don't feel safer because I won. I feel safer because I fought. I came to this valley for quiet. I didn't expect to build a wall to get it. But sometimes peace doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes you have to lock the door first.